And so you mentioned in your conversation there about that notion of community. And I've heard you talk about rituals and routines. And I've heard Barb Pears get on the same conversation around routines and expectations. And so when you say things like rituals and routines, what sort of things are you thinking about in terms of that online environment?
Yeah, I think key to that community piece is that interaction with kids, and I always think back to face teaching. You know, always meet your kids at the door, and always say goodbye when they leave the class. Right? It's not just a common courtesy. It's a connection piece, right? You can gauge what their day is like, by their demeanor as they walk in the door. Are they tired? Are they happy? Are they sad? It's a little harder to gauge that online sometimes. And so spending that time, that non-academic time with students is crucial. I think it really opens up the door to letting them feel comfortable with each other and with you. So if you're talking about things like hobbies or common interests, there's all sorts of icebreaker games that you can play. Just as an example, I think there's one called "Hey, That's Me," and you say, like, how many people have a pet? Oh, hey, that's me, and you put your hand up. I always refer back to a colleague from Calgary who said about time well wasted, and hopefully he hasn't patented that term because I'm infringing on it. But it was a conversation that you would have with students. It'd take maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, and you do it on a Monday morning. In this case, anyway, and you kind of get a feel for how the kids are doing, but you get to know them so much better because you're talking about things that aren't school. And so it was a way to go around the class and spend time with each other and get to know each other's interests. And I think that really goes a long way to trust. It's like if you're in a classroom and you know each other a bit and you've got a bit of a rapport, then you can work together so much more easily. You're not going to be as afraid to answer questions, that sort of thing. I always think back to when I taught drama. Uh, I always had kids that were put in drama because they didn't fit in any other option. And it was a place for them to experience something new. Being in front of a crowd, whether it was a classroom of your peers as that crowd, can be pretty daunting for, like I had learned from university, from my final practicum professor in drama, was we have the right to dissent within that room, which means we can say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to participate because I'm not comfortable enough to do that yet. But, disclaimer, I will try something eventually, but I'm not there yet. And I think the same works with online. You might get kids that they don't want to put their camera on, or they don't want to have that same interactivity. They might just want to like put their hand up off on the side or in the chat, and build up their confidence and build up their comfort level, and then eventually they're going to start to interact more so with you as the instructor and with their peers. I think another big piece of online learning, which is really a nice thing, is that we can book, and I suggest that people do this every week, is to book one-on-one time with every single one of your students. Whether it's a 5-minute conversation or a 15-minute conversation, then you can talk about your schoolwork. This is, maybe not so much the non-academic stuff, but you can talk about the academic stuff with them then. And you might have a little bit of time for some chit chat too. It's just another layer on top of that where you're building that relationship with kids. And I think that that's really important, because once they're comfortable with that space, because it is such a foreign space for a lot of us, right? We've been thrown into this on the most part. A lot of people didn't choose this until this year, and that's not a surprise. But now people are, and so yeah, we want to make them feel like this is still a community. This is still a school. We still have expectations. And so part of those rituals is part of the expectation every week. We're going to do this, walk the walk with the kids, right? If you're going to say you're going to have a conversation with them every week, maybe every day, then do it. There's all sorts of ways to make up time, because I think that's a real concern for instructors as well. If I spend all this time talking with my kids about stuff that it's not school, then they're not going to have enough time to cover the curriculum. And I don't think that's correct. I think in an online learning environment, there's opportunities to give asynchronous work that is little less time consuming than what we have in class. Because in class, face to face, we have student management. And we got to walk around class and we got to talk to people and get supplies and do this and that and the next thing. And that eats up a bit of that time. Not a whole lot, but a bit. And so you can gain back those bits of time online very easily, I find. But it can also provide clarity for what you're doing. And so you might not get as many questions, and kids might be able to walk off and get their stuff done much quicker. Perfect example, my son's upstairs right now. He's doing his online school this week. He did his math work in half an hour. He's done. He's done for the day, for that component anyway. So they know, like, oh, gee, if I get all this stuff done, then I've got some free time to do other things, which is always nice. But anyway, just getting back to the rituals and schedules and expectations, they are paramount no matter what you teach or where you teach. Every school has rules, every school has timetables, and it shouldn't be any different than online learning. It should have all of that too. You should have expectations, and those expectations need to be super clear, right? What are your expectations for going online with a camera? What are your expectations for doing breakout rooms? What are your expectations for handing in your assignments? How do you do that? All those different things, right? And so you really have to break it down into little manageable chunks for them so they understand, okay, all these little pieces build up this big picture. But I think it's also really important for parents or other people supporting those kids. If they understand that there is a structure and there is a ritual that happens every week, then there's going to be no guesswork. People aren't going to be contacting you on a regular basis going, I don't know what to do, because you've already laid it out for them. And that will translate across grades as well. So if that becomes the norm in grade 1, then when you move to grade 2, that's going to be the same thing, right? There's going to be expectations that follow through, just like face-to-face school. They're going to be there no matter what. And so there's flexibility in there for how you timetable things or when you have discussions with kids. But there's other, pieces of that puzzle that are just going to be there no matter what. And if you make that clear right from the get-go, then it's really going to help people. It's going to help them with all the support that they need.
Let's talk about the communication, because you talked there a lot about the structure for parents and making sure that parents and the people at home support. And I've heard you talk about the 4 points of possible communication. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you mean by that and how teachers can leverage those?
There's so much communication in education no matter what, right? And so I think with online, I always say there's 4 points of contact. As an instructor with your families that you're teaching with. You got your email, you got phone, you got text messaging, and then of course you've got this type of interaction with an online conference. And I think if you can do all 4 of those things, that's great, but that might not be the reality. It might be that the best way to get a hold of a parent is to pick up the phone. Everyone has a preferred choice. Maybe people have more than one, or it might be, on this particular day, this is going to work for me best. But if you don't try them all, you'll never know. And I think it has to be consistent. I think there should be that reaching out to students and families on a regular basis, right? But you'll find really quickly that parents are pretty responsive when it comes to their kids and their kids learning, and some are more than others, but yeah, if you reach out, chances are they're going to have a conversation with you. And usually it's a positive one. I think the other part about communication is who to talk to about what. And that's important as well. So, when I put myself in a student's shoes or a parent's shoes, I think, okay, if I need help or if something's not working, who do I talk to? Is it the teacher I talk to first? Or is it the tech people, or is it, who do I go to? And so that's part of that clear communication piece. Sometimes school divisions will send out information, blanket information about something, but it's got to say, okay, if you have questions about this, this is who you contact, right?
And then you talked a little bit about how we've sort of been thrown into this sort of online learning realm and bringing kids into the digital learning environment. But we often take advantage of the fact that we think they're digital natives and we think they know how to operate online because they've had this technology around them all this time. And so I've heard you talk about the importance of digital citizenship being embedded into online learning. So do you want to elaborate a little on that?
I always think back to when I taught media arts because everything we relied on in that class came down to the computer. Manipulate everything. We did video production and animation and all that sort of stuff. And I always had parents say, I don't understand why my kid's mark isn't so good. They're so good with computers. And then I asked them, well, what do you see them doing on a computer? Oh, well, they play video games or they chat with their friends. And it's like, that doesn't mean they know how to copy and paste something. so, uh, so yeah, I think there's kind of two things here. Like with digital citizenship, that's a different thing than computer skills. So maybe I'll talk about that first. I think because students and families use a lot of social media, it's kind of become the norm for a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people. There are certain things that we need to be aware of as far as etiquette is concerned, right? It's like table manners. We kind of know them, but if nobody teaches you them, you might not know them. So there's certain things that in a school I think are important to learn as far as digital citizenship, and that's how you converse with people online, what's appropriate, what's not, when to do it. Even just things like how to set up your camera and being aware of your background and things like that. Those are all part of the pieces. But I think the bigger thing is, how you're conversing with people. And one thing that is hard for people to wrap their heads around, I think, is that if it's on the internet, it's there forever. And that is something that can really, especially for a student, is really have a negative impact on them down the road. I think it's important to teach kids about digital citizenship because sometimes their parents don't know about it. They don't know that net etiquette. And so if we're teaching them that expectation, then that's something that I think will help them throughout their school and beyond, right? Uh, whether you're going off into a post-secondary environment or into a work environment, we do so many things online now as far as communication is concerned. Yeah, we need to understand what is appropriate and what's not. There's so many different aspects of digital citizenship that we need to be aware of. There's that, there's the communication, there's security. That's a huge part of it, is net security. Especially, when we talk about children, we want to make sure that when they're online, they're not being exposed to some nefarious person on the other end. And so that's something that we need to train them about. We used to tell kids, don't take a ride from a stranger or talk to a stranger. Well, the stranger's now on the other side of the internet and you don't see them. Or you see a picture, an avatar that is a misrepresentation of who they really are. Passwords are key to your security. And web browsers very recently have been very good about telling you how many of your passwords have you compromised, and that you're to go in and change them all. Because if people can get that information, then they might be able to access things that you don't want them to know about. I think it's important to, to touch on digital citizenship, because it is a big part of it. Yeah, it's just like etiquette in the classroom. You've got expectations on behavior and communication, and so it transfers into the online.
And you talked in there about digital citizenship, but the digital skills as well. I mean, we often take for granted, again, that kids know how to do things like copy and paste or log into this website or so on. It's coming to light that they don't all know how to do those things.
We used to have typing classes, and and some schools still offer like IT type classes where you learn Word and Excel and things like that. But it's been infused into the curriculum as what we call ICT outcomes. And so some teachers are very, very tech savvy. They know lots of stuff about that. They'll teach their kids about that, and others know very basic stuff. And so what your child learns in the classroom really is dependent on what that teacher knows. And I think the one thing that I've noticed, especially in senior high, is that we get kids that come into diploma exams and they're writing them on the computer, and they don't know some of the basic shortcuts that would save them time. Being a digital native doesn't mean that you've just grown up with a device in your hand. It means that you know how to use it. And know some of the ins and outs of the programs that you're using. And unfortunately, we don't necessarily learn those in school like we used to. But I think online, as an online instructor, it's definitely important that you take the time to show students those things, because, like I said, it's going to save them time, and it's going to make their workflow so much easier.
With everything that we're talking about, I mean, like I said, you and I can take certain things for granted, and we now have teachers who have embraced the opportunity to instruct online, as well as been put in a position because that's what is needed at this time. What advice would you share with them as they set up for their new online classrooms?
Boy, that's a big question. I think the number one piece of advice is just to keep it simple to start with. Don't try to go for all the bells and whistles, because there's a ton of online software and interactive things out there that can really consume you. And they're great, don't get me wrong. But I think, keep it simple to start with until you can get a feel for how it's going to work, and build on it from there. It's no different than face to face in many ways. Like, you build your year plan, your unit plan, your lesson plan, and it's like this structure online. You build that framework of where things go and the order they go in and how they roll out. And yeah, I think it's really important that you get some of those key pieces in there. Your instructions, your expectations, your rubrics for assessment, all those things that you would typically use anyway, and just build from there.